Let's sew a buttonhole on the 160s machine. This is the one-step buttonhole. So in our stitch selection dial, we're going to set it up for the buttonhole. For the stitch length, we're going to turn it to this little picture of the buttonhole, and I'm going to set it kind of in the middle. You'll have to test, do a sample buttonhole to see exactly where you want to set it. Stitch width. The setup manual, by the way, the manual page, the page in the manual is 29, where it gives instructions for setting this up. And it tells us that the stitch width should be between 4 and 6. I'm going to set it on 5. And again, this is a matter of personal preference. You can experiment a little to see where exactly you want to set it. The tension is between 3 and 5, so I'm going to set it up on 4, which is kind of our mid-range. And the presser foot that we're going to use is the 5B foot, which is the foot that looks like this. So getting this set up, these little projections over here are called stops, and they control how big your buttonhole is going to be. So to set this up, we're going to push the back stop to the back of the foot like this, and it opens up this area in the back. We're going to take our button and put it right down in there and close it up. So the button is trapped in the buttonhole foot. So now this area here, this distance between the stops, is going to control how big our buttonhole is going to be made. We're going to put this on here. The button goes to the back of the machine, and here's the little pin that's going to hold the buttonhole foot on the machine. So I'm going to move it back underneath the presser foot drop and bring the presser foot down to snap it on. I want my needle thread to be down in this hole so that it's under the foot. I do that, get it down there by taking a pair of tweezers and grabbing the thread and just pushing it down in there, reaching under and pulling the thread under the foot. All right? Now, let's take a look over here. You know where the needle threader is? Right here? Well, behind the needle threader, there is another lever that pulls down back here. And that's for the buttonhole. So you want to pull it all the way down, and you want it to be behind that stop. So it's going to be behind this stop here in the front. Okay? So we have it set up. Now when we sew, it's going to sew toward the back. It's going to do a crossover and then sew forward again. So when I sew a buttonhole, I usually am sewing through 3 layers of fabric. Just imagine the front of a blouse or a shirt. You usually have a layer of fashion fabric on the outside. You have another layer of fashion fabric on the inside, and you have some interfacing between them. So you're sewing through 3 layers of fabric. So to kind of simulate that here, I folded my fabric into 3 parts. And I'm going to sew my buttonhole onto this piece of fabric. The only thing I have to do is mark where I want my buttonhole to begin, and you can do that with a pin or a pencil. I'm going to do it with ink, just so you can see where it is. But of course, on a real project, I wouldn't use ink. A fabric marker, chalk, pin, something like this. I'm going to put this back under here, and I'm not sure that you can really see it. But right down, if I look down in the opening right here of the foot, I can see where I made that little mark, and I'm going to hand turn my needle right down into that mark. And then I'm going to get my fabric oriented the way I want it so that the buttonhole is going to sew in the correct direction. Put my presser foot down. Make sure that my threads are pulled to the back of the machine. Put my presser foot down and sew. And everything is done automatically except for stopping the machine. I do have to take my foot off the pedal to stop the machine. Bring my take-up lever to the top, to the high position. Raise my presser foot and pull it out and cut my thread. And there's my buttonhole. Now, I do like to use a product called Fray Check. Which is a seam sealant, and I like to put a drop of it right down in this opening before I open my buttonhole. It kind of seals those threads so that they don't fray. And I can trim off my thread tails. And there's my buttonhole. To open the buttonhole, you can take your seam ripper or a small pair of scissors. And just cut it. Being careful to not cut through the ends of the buttonhole. If you want to do another one, it's all set up to start your next buttonhole. You don't have to do anything. Just put your fabric underneath there and start to sew. So in this case, I actually started stitching back over this first column and then stopped. So if I want to start another buttonhole, at this point I would come back over to my stitch selector, turn it off, and turn it back on again so that it's reset back at the beginning of the buttonhole. And when you're finished, of course, you want to put your paddle back up and take your foot off of the machine.